were Hercule Poirot. Exposed, the truth behind his little grey cells, but no one, the enigma of the grey cells. The rain fell in relentless sheets over London, turning the cobblestones of Baker Street into a glistening mirror of gaslight. Inside the modest yet impeccably tidy flat of Hercule Poirot, the air was warm, scented faintly with the aroma of tisane and the sharp tang of furniture polish. Poirot sat in his favourite armchair, a small, elegant figure dwarfed by the grandeur of his own reputation. His moustache, waxed to perfection, gleamed under the lamplight as he studied the letter in his hands. Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal friend and occasional chronicler, paced by the fireplace. "I say, Poirot, this is a rum business. Scotland Yard at a loss, and they've come to you? What's the case, then?" Poirot's eyes, sharp and green as a cat's, flicked up from the letter. "Patience, mon ami. It is not the case that intrigues me, but the puzzle of the mind that created it." He tapped his temple lightly. "The little grey cells, Hastings. They are already at work." The letter, penned in the hurried scrawl of Chief Inspector Japp, outlined a murder that had baffled the Yard. Lord Reginald Ashbourne, a wealthy industrialist, had been found dead in his Mayfair study, a single bullet through his heart. The room was locked from the inside, the key still in the door. No weapon was found, no footprints marred the polished floor, and the only window was latched tight. The servants swore no one had entered or left, and yet Ashbourne was dead, his face frozen in a look of surprise. "It's impossible," Hastings declared, throwing up his hands. "A locked room, no gun, no suspect. How does a man get shot in his own study with no one to pull the trigger?" Poirot smiled, a small enigmatic curve of his lips. "Impossible, you say? No, no, Hastings. The impossible is merely the possible that has not yet been understood. The grey cells, they will find the thread." He rose, moving with the precision of a dancer, and began to arrange the objects on his desk. A pen, a notebook, a small silver paperweight. Each was placed with deliberate care, as if their alignment held the key to the mystery. Hastings watched, half amused, half exasperated. "You're fussing again, Poirot. What's the good of straightening pens when there's a murderer on the loose?" "Order, Hastings," Poirot replied, his voice soft but firm. "Order is the foundation of thought. A disordered room, a disordered mind. This crime, it appears chaotic, but beneath the surface there is method. We must find it. The next morning, Poirot and Hastings arrived at the Ashbourne residence, a grand Georgian pile that loomed over Mayfair like a stern patriarch. Inspector Japp greeted them at the door, his face a map of frustration. "I've seen some queer cases, Mr. Poirot, but this one's got me stumped. No way in, no way out, and yet the man's dead as a doornail." Poirot nodded, his eyes already scanning the hallway. "Show me the room, if you please." The study was a monument to opulence. Mahogany panelling, a vast desk, shelves heavy with leather-bound books. The air still carried the faint metallic scent of blood, though the body had been removed. Poirot moved slowly, his patent leather shoes silent on the Persian rug. He examined the lock, the window, the fireplace, pausing occasionally to tilt his head, as if listening to a voice only he could hear. "Curious," he murmured, crouching to inspect the desk. A single sheet of paper lay there, its edges slightly curled. It bore a cryptic message in Ashbourne's hand. "The truth lies in the mirror." Poirot's fingers traced the words, his brow furrowing. "What's that mean?" Japp asked, peering over his shoulder. "Some sort of clue?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, "or perhaps a taunt. The mind of the killer, it plays games with us." Hastings frowned. "But there's no mirror in here, Poirot. Not a single one." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Exactement, mon ami. And that is the first thread." Over the next hours, Poirot questioned the household. The butler, a stoic man named Grayson, swore he'd heard nothing but the rain. Lady Ashbourne, pale and trembling, claimed her husband had no enemies. The maid, a nervous girl called Elsie, mentioned a strange visitor the previous week, a man with a foreign accent who left no name. Poirot listened, his face impassive, but Hastings could see the gears turning behind those sharp eyes. Back at Baker Street that evening, Poirot sat in silence, his fingers steepled. Hastings, unable to bear the quiet, burst out, "Well, have you got it? Who killed Ashbourne?" Poirot's smile was faint. "The grey cells, they whisper, but they do not yet shout. The locked room, the missing weapon, the note about the mirror, these are pieces of a puzzle. But the true enigma, Hastings, is not how the crime was committed, but why it was designed to seem impossible." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "This killer, they wish to challenge me. They know of Hercule Poirot, and they say, 'Solve this, if you can.' And so I shall." As the fire crackled and the rain battered the windows, Poirot's mind began to weave the threads together, his little grey cells alight with the thrill of the chase. The truth, he knew, was close, but it would not reveal itself without a fight. Chapter 2. The Mask of Meticulousness. The morning sun pierced the fog that clung to Mayfair, casting a pale glow over the Ashbourne residence. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand foyer, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his eyes sweeping the space with the precision of a metronome. The marble floor gleamed, the chandelier sparkled, and every vase and portrait was perfectly aligned. Yet, to Poirot, something was amiss, a discord in the symphony of order. Captain Hastings, stifling, a yawn, adjusted his tie. "I don't see why we're back here, Poirot." "The study's been combed through," the servants questioned. "What's left to find?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of mild amusement. "Mon ami, you see, but you do not observe. The crime, it is not only in the study, it is in the house, in the air, in the very soul of this place. And it is here," he tapped his chest, "that the mask of meticulousness hides the truth." The Ashbourne case had deepened in complexity. Scotland Yard, under Inspector Japp's weary command, had uncovered no new leads. The locked study, the absent murder weapon, and the cryptic note. "The truth lies in the mirror," remained as baffling as ever. But Poirot, undeterred, insisted on returning to the scene, convinced that the killer's hand had left an imprint beyond the obvious. They were met by Grayson, the butler, whose impeccable posture and measured tone betrayed no hint of the household's turmoil. "Lady Ashbourne is in the drawing-room, sir," he said, bowing slightly. "She is distressed." "Naturellement," Poirot murmured, following Grayson. "A widow must mourn, but does she mourn only her husband, I wonder?" The drawing room was a study in elegance. Silk curtains, polished rosewood furniture, and a tea service arranged with mathematical precision. Lady Ashbourne, clad in black, sat rigidly on a settee, her hands folded in her lap. Her eyes, red-rimmed but dry, met Poirot's with a flicker of defiance. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady, "have you found who killed my husband?" "Not yet, madame," Poirot replied, settling into a chair with the grace of a cat. "But I am close. The truth, it hides behind a veil of perfection. Tell me, this house, it is always so orderly?" Lady Ashbourne blinked. Of course, Reginald insisted on it. He could not abide clutter or chaos. "Intéressant," Poirot said, his gaze drifting to the tea-tray. The cups were aligned, the spoons parallel, the sugar bowl centred exactly. "And you, madame, do you share this passion for order?" She hesitated, a crack in her composure. "I try to maintain it, for his sake." Poirot nodded, filing the moment away. He rose and began to pace the room, his fingers brushing the edge of a sideboard, pausing at a vase that sat a fraction off-centre. He adjusted it, his movements deliberate, then turned to Hastings. "You see, mon ami, the perfect crime is like the perfect house. It appears flawless, but the smallest flaw, a vase, a word, a glance, betrays the hand that tried to make it. So, leaving Lady Ashbourne, Poirot requested a tour of the house. Grayson led them through parlours, bedrooms and galleries, each space as pristine as a museum. Yet Poirot's attention lingered on the smallest details. A curtain slightly askew, a rug with a corner turned up, a book on a shelf not quite flush with its neighbours. To Hastings, these were trivial. To Poirot, they were screams in the silence. In the library, Poirot paused before a towering bookcase. The volumes were arranged by size and colour, a visual harmony that pleased his eye, almost. One book, a slim volume of poetry, protruded slightly. He pulled it out, revealing a small, hidden compartment behind it. Inside was a single object, a broken pocket watch, its hands frozen at 11:47. "By Jove!" Hastings exclaimed. "What's that doing there?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "It is a clue, Hastings. Or perhaps a taunt. The killer they wish to play, a game of order and disorder." Back at Baker Street, Poirot sat at his desk, the watch before him. He had learned from Grayson that the watch belonged to Lord Ashbourne, a gift from his late father, always carried until the day of his death. Why hide it? And why was it broken at 11:47, when the murder occurred closer to midnight? "Poirot," Hastings ventured, "do you think the killer staged the scene to look perfect? To throw us off?" "Précisément," Poirot said, leaning back. "The meticulousness, it is a mask. The locked room, the clean floor, the note about the mirror, all designed to dazzle and distract. But the watch, it is a mistake, a crack in the facade. The grey cells, they begin to see the shape of the truth." He closed his eyes, his fingers drumming lightly. "The killer is someone who knows this house, who knows Lord Ashbourne's obsession with order. They use it against him, but they cannot resist leaving a mark of their own chaos. We must find that mark, Hastings, and the mask will fall." As the firelight danced across Poirot's serene face, the little grey cells churned, unravelling the threads of a crime that was as much a performance as it was a murder. The game, he knew, had only just begun. Chapter 3. Shadows of Ostend. The fog had thickened over London, wrapping Baker Street in a shroud that muffled sound and blurred the edges of reality. Inside Hercule Poirot's flat, the air was warm and still, the only sound the soft tick of a clock and the occasional crackle of the fire. Poirot sat at his desk, the broken pocket-watch from the Ashbourne library before him, its frozen hands a silent challenge. His fingers, usually so precise, hovered over the watch, hesitant, as if it held more than mere metal and glass. Captain Hastings, sprawled in an armchair, glanced up from his newspaper. "You've been staring at that watch for an hour, Poirot. What's it got to do with Ashbourne's murder? And why the long face? You look as if you've seen a ghost." Poirot's eyes, sharp and distant, met Hastings. "A ghost, mon ami. Perhaps. The past. It has a way of reaching out, does it? Not? This watch, it speaks of time, of loss, of Ostend." "Ostend?" Hastings frowned. "What's Ostend got to do with anything?" Poirot leaned back, his gaze drifting to the window, though the fog obscured all but his own reflection. "Ostend, Hastings, is where Hercule Poirot was not always the man you know. It is where the grey cells first learned to dance with justice, and where they first tasted failure." The Ashbourne case had grown thornier. The locked study, the missing weapon, the cryptic note, and now the hidden watch had woven a tapestry of riddles. But the watch, with its faint inscription, "To Reginald from father," had stirred something in Poirot, a memory long buried. He had seen such a watch before, in a different life, in a seaside town where the waves whispered secrets. "Tell me, Hastings," Poirot said softly, "have I ever spoken of my time as a policeman in Belgium?" Hastings blinked, caught off guard. "Not much. You've mentioned it in passing, something about detective work before the war. But you're not one for reminiscing, old chap." "Non," Poirot agreed, a faint smile touching his lips. "The past, it is a locked room of its own. But sometimes the key is found." He rose, moving to the mantelpiece, where he adjusted a small porcelain figurine a fraction to the right. "In Ostend, many years ago, there was a case. A man, a merchant, found dead in his home. A single wound, no weapon, no witnesses. The room, it was locked. The crime, it seemed impossible." Hastings sat up, intrigued. "Sounds familiar. Did you solve it?" Poirot's smile faded. "No, Hastings, I did not. The merchant, Monsieur Dubois, was a good man. His death, it was my first great failure. The killer, they left a mark, a watch, broken, hidden in a place only I would find. A taunt, you see, to show me they had won." He turned, his voice low. "This watch of Lord Ashbourne, it is too similar. The same craftsmanship, the same deliberate break. It is as if the shadows of Ostend have followed me to London." The next day Poirot and Hastings visited the British Museum, where Poirot had arranged to meet an old acquaintance, Monsieur Lefebvre, a Belgian historian who specialized in pre-war European artifacts. Lefebvre, a wiry man with spectacles perched on his nose, greeted them in a cluttered office filled with books and relics. "Mon vieux Hercule," Lefebvre said, clasping Poirot's hand. "It has been too long. You say this watch is important?" "Oui," Poirot replied, placing the watch on the desk. It belonged to Lord Ashbourne, but its design, its inscription, it reminds me of another. Tell me, what do you see?" Lefebvre examined the watch, his magnifying glass catching the light. Swiss, early 1890s. Exquisite work, likely custom-made. The inscription, it is personal, yes, but the mechanism, curious. There is a mark here, on the casing. A tiny crest, almost invisible. I have seen it before, in records of a Belgian craftsman, one who worked for a select clientele in Ostende. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And this craftsman? Dead long ago, Lefebvre said. But his work was prized by men of wealth and men of secrets. This watch, it could link to your case, Hercule, but it could also link to others. Back at Baker Street, Poirot paced, his mind a whirlwind. The connection to Ostende was no coincidence. The killer, he sensed, was not merely copying a crime, but invoking his past, challenging him to face the failure he had buried. He turned to Hastings, who was scribbling notes. "Hastings, we must return to the Ashbourne house. The watch was hidden, yes, but not for us to find. It was for me. The killer, they know of Ostende. They know of Dubois. They wish to unravel Hercule Poirot as much as I wish to unravel them." Hastings looked alarmed. "But who could know about your past? You're not exactly an open book, Poirot." "Précisément," Poirot said, his voice steel. "That is why we must look closer. At the household, at the stranger with the foreign accent Elsie mentioned, at anyone who might bridge my past and this present." As the fog pressed against the windows, Poirot's little grey cells churned, weaving the threads of Ostende and London into a pattern only he could see. The killer had thrown down a gauntlet, and Poirot, with the weight of his past upon him, was ready to answer. Chapter 4. The Art of Deception. The air in the Ashbourne residence hung heavy with the scent of lavender polish and unspoken grief. Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing-room, his small frame dwarfed by the towering portraits of Ashbourne ancestors, their stern gazes seeming to judge the living. His patent leather shoes gleamed, his moustache was a perfect arc, and his demeanour was one of deliberate mildness, a mask of harmless eccentricity. But behind his twinkling eyes, the little grey cells were ablaze, orchestrating a performance as calculated as any theatrical production. Captain Hastings, seated on a velvet-upholstered chair, shifted uncomfortably. "I don't see why we're back here again, Poirot. We've questioned everyone twice over. The butler, the maid, Lady Ashbourne. They're all sticking to their stories." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Mon ami, the truth is, not in what they say, but in what they do not. The art of deception, it is a dance, and I, Hercule Poirot, am its choreographer." He adjusted a slightly crooked picture frame on the wall, his fingers lingering as if the act held cosmic significance. "Today, we shall make them dance." The Ashbourne case had grown more tangled with each revelation. The locked study, the missing weapon, the cryptic note, the broken watch with its echoes of Ostende, all pointed to a killer who delighted in complexity. Poirot's discovery of the watch's Belgian origins had deepened the mystery, suggesting a personal challenge. Now, he was determined to unsettle the household, to crack the polished facade of their stories. He had requested a gathering of the key players, Lady Ashbourne, Grayson the butler, Elsie the maid, and a new figure, Mr. Victor Crane, a business associate of Lord Ashbourne, who had been abroad during the murder but had returned to London. Crane, a tall man with a sharp jaw and a restless energy, stood by the fireplace, his eyes darting between Poirot and the others. "Monsieur Poirot," Lady Ashbourne said, her voice brittle, "I trust you have progress to report. This intrusion is most distressing." "Mais oui, madame," Poirot replied, bowing slightly. "I am close, very close to the truth. But the truth, it is shy. It requires a little coaxing." He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his tone light, but laced with steel. "Let us review, shall we? A man is dead, shot in a locked room. No weapon, no footprints, only a note. The truth lies in the mirror, and yet there is no mirror. Curious, non?" Grayson, standing ramrod straight, nodded curtly. "As I've said, sir, I heard nothing but the rain that night. And I," Elsie stammered, twisting her apron, "I was in the kitchen, nowhere near the study." Crane cleared his throat. "I was in Paris, as the police have verified. I only learned of Reginald's death upon my return." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Oui, oui, all so neat, so tidy. But the grey cells, they whisper of disorder beneath the surface." He stopped abruptly, turning to Elsie with an exaggerated frown. "Mademoiselle Elsie, you mentioned a visitor, a man with a foreign accent, yes? Describe him again, s'il vous plaît." Elsie flushed, her hands trembling. I only saw him briefly, sir. Tall, dark hair, a moustache. He spoke softly, like you, sir." Poirot's eyebrows shot up, his expression one of mock surprise. "Like me? Mon Dieu, a doppelganger. Perhaps I am the killer, no?" He chuckled, but the room grew tense, the others exchanging uneasy glances. Hastings catching. Poirot's game suppressed a grin. Poirot was playing the fool, but every word, every gesture was a probe, designed to unsettle. "Now, Monsieur Crane," Poirot continued, pivoting smoothly, "you and Lord Ashbourne, you were partners in business, yes? Steel, I believe, a lucrative trade, but not without enemies?" Crane's jaw tightened. "Reginald was a hard man, but fair. If he had enemies, they weren't in our circle." "Vraiment?" Poirot tilted his head, his tone almost childlike. "And yet someone shot him, someone who knew this house, who knew his habits, someone, perhaps, who knew of a watch hidden in a library." The room froze. Lady Ashbourne's teacup clattered against its saucer. Grayson's eyes narrowed. Elsie gasped, and Crane's hand twitched toward his pocket before he caught himself. Poirot, seemingly oblivious, hummed a little tune, adjusting. "A cushion on the settee." "Poirot," Hastings whispered, "you're stirring a hornet's nest." "Exactement," Poirot murmured back, his voice barely audible. "The nest, it must be stirred to see what flies out." He turned to Lady Ashbourne, his tone softening. "Madame, forgive my bluntness, but your husband, he was a man of secrets. None? The watch, the note, these are not the acts of a simple man. Did he ever speak of Ostend? Of a past that might follow him?" Her face paled, but she shook her head. "Never. Reginald was private." Poirot nodded as if satisfied, but his eyes missed nothing. The flicker of fear in her gaze, the stiffness in Grayson's posture, the sweat on Crane's brow. He clapped his hands, startling Elsie. "Eh bien, I thank you all. The grey cells, they are content for now, but rest assured, the truth it will not hide forever." As they left the house, Hastings exhaled. "Good Lord, Poirot, you had them squirming, but did you learn anything?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Oh yes, mon ami, the art of deception is not only theirs, but mine. They lie, they conceal, but in their fear they reveal. The killer is among them, Hastings, and they know I am close. The dance, it has begun." Back at Baker Street, Poirot sat by the fire, his mind replaying the big scene. The little grey cells, sharpened by years of such performances, were piecing together the fragments. Ostend, the watch, the note, and now the cracks in the household's composure. The killer had underestimated him, but Poirot, master of the masquerade, would not be outplayed. Chapter 5. The Unseen Observer. The streets of London shimmered with the damp sheen of a recent rain, the gaslights casting wavering reflections on the cobblestones. Inside Hercule Poirot's Baker Street flat, the atmosphere was one of quiet intensity. Poirot stood before a small mirror, not to admire his impeccable moustache, but to study it with an almost clinical detachment, as if it held the key to the Ashbourne mystery. The mirror, he mused, was not just a clue, but a metaphor for his own method, to see what others missed, to reflect the unseen. Captain Hastings, nursing a cup of tea, watched Poirot with growing impatience. "I say, Poirot, you've been awfully cryptic since that scene at the Ashbourne house. You rattled them all, Lady Ashbourne, Grayson, Crane, even poor Elsie. But what did it get us? We're no closer to finding the killer." Poirot turned, his eyes bright with a fire Hastings recognized as the prelude to revelation. "Au contraire, mon ami, we are closer than you think. The grey cells, they have observed what the eyes of others pass over. The unseen, Hastings. It is the heart of this case. The Ashbourne murder remained a labyrinth of contradictions. The locked study, the absent weapon, the note about a mirror that did not exist, the broken watch tied to Poirot's past in Ostende, Poirot's theatrical performance in the drawing room had exposed cracks in the household's facade. But the killer's identity remained elusive. Now, Poirot's focus had shifted to the smallest details, the overlooked fragments that others dismissed as insignificant. "We return to the scene, Hastings," Poirot announced, donning his overcoat with a flourish. "But this time we look, not for what is there, but for what is not." At the Ashbourne residence, the air was thick with tension. Grayson admitted them with his usual stoic courtesy, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Poirot, ignoring the grandeur of the foyer, moved directly to the study, his steps purposeful. The room was as they had left it. The polished desk, the heavy curtains, the shelves of books untouched since the murder. Yet Poirot's gaze was not on the obvious, but on the periphery. He crouched by the fireplace, his gloved fingers tracing the edge of the hearth. "Curious," he murmured, brushing away a speck of ash. "The fire. It was lit that night, yes?" Grayson, standing in the doorway, nodded. "Yes, sir. Lord Ashbourne liked a fire, even in mild weather." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet the ash, it is too clean." A fire burns for hours. It leaves traces, soot, embers, irregularities. This hearth, it is pristine. He stood, his expression one of quiet triumph. Someone has cleaned it, and not for the sake of tidiness. Hastings frowned. Cleaned the fireplace? But why? The murder was by gunshot, not fire. Exactement, Poirot said, his voice low, and that is why it matters. The unseen observer, Hastings, sees what is out of place. A cleaned hearth in a room where a man was shot. It is a whisper of the truth. Poirot's inspection continued, his movements slow and deliberate. He examined the window latch, the floorboards, the underside of the desk. At the bookshelf, he paused, his fingers hovering over a gap where a book was missing. "Monsieur Grayson," he called, "a book is absent here. Do you know of it?" Grayson approached, his face impassive. "I'm not certain, sir. Lord Ashbourne's collection was extensive. Perhaps it was misplaced." "Misplaced," Poirot echoed, his tone laced with scepticism. "Or removed. The grey cells, they note this absence." Leaving the study, Poirot requested to speak with Elsie, the maid, alone. She appeared in the servants' hall, her apron twisted in her nervous hands. "Sir, I've told you all I know," she said, her voice trembling. "Calme-toi, mademoiselle," Poirot said gently. "I wish only to ask about the night of the murder. You were in the kitchen, yes? Did you hear anything at all? A sound? A movement, perhaps near the back stairs?" Elsie's eyes widened and she hesitated. I thought I heard a creak, sir, like a floorboard, but it was stormy, and I figured it was the house settling." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, Elsie. You have been most helpful." Back at Baker Street, Poirot sat at his desk, a small notebook open before him. He sketched a rough map of the Ashbourne house, marking the study, the fireplace, the back stairs. Hastings, peering over his shoulder, shook his head. "A clean fireplace, a missing book, a creaky stair. What does it all mean, Poirot?" "It means, mon ami, that the killer is clever but not invisible," Poirot replied. "They move through the house, they tamper with the scene, but they leave traces. Traces that only the unseen observer can find. The fireplace was cleaned to hide something, perhaps ash from a different source. The book was taken to conceal a secret. The creak on the stairs, it suggests a path, a way in or out that we have not yet seen." He leaned back, his fingers steepled. "The killer, they think they have outwitted Hercule Poirot. But the grey cells, they see the unseen. The mirror, the watch, the Ostend connection, they are all part of a pattern, and the pattern is beginning to emerge." As the evening deepened, Poirot's mind churned, piecing together the fragments of a crime designed to defy detection. The unseen observer, he knew, would soon bring the hidden into the light. Chapter 6. Allies and Adversaries. The late afternoon light filtered through the heavy curtains of Hercule Poirot's Baker Street flat, casting long shadows across the room. Poirot sat at his desk, a cup of tisane cooling untouched beside him, his notebook open to a page filled with meticulous diagrams and cryptic notes. The Ashbourne case had become a chessboard, and Poirot was calculating his next move, aware that every piece, ally or adversary, could shift the game. Captain Hastings burst through the door, his face flushed with excitement. Poirot, I've just come from Scotland Yard. Jap's got a new lead. A telegram from Paris about Victor Crane. Seems he wasn't just in Paris for business. There's talk of a shady deal tied to Ashbourne's steel empire. Poirot's eyes gleamed, but his voice remained calm. Bon Hastings, this is most interesting. Monsieur Crane, he plays the part of the loyal associate, but perhaps he is more adversary than ally. And you, mon ami, you are proving most useful. Hastings grinned, then hesitated. Useful, eh? I sometimes wonder if you tell me everything. Poirot, you and Jap, you're thick as thieves, but I'm always a step behind. Poirot's moustache twitched with amusement. Mon cher Hastings, you are the heart of our trio, not the head. Your loyalty, your courage, they anchor us. But the grey cells, they must work in silence, lest the adversary overhear. The Ashbourne murder had grown more intricate with each discovery. The locked study, the missing weapon, the note about a non-existent mirror, the broken watch linked to Poirot's past in Ostende, and now the cleaned fireplace and missing book. Poirot's probing had unsettled the household, but the killer remained a shadow. The dynamic between Poirot, Hastings, and Inspector Japp was now critical, as trust and suspicion intertwined. Japp arrived shortly after, his coat damp from the drizzle outside. He tossed a file onto Poirot's desk. Here's the dirt on Crane. He was meeting a French arms dealer in Paris the night Ashbourne died. Claims it was routine, but the dealer's got ties to some unsavoury types. Could be motive. Maybe Ashbourne was cutting Crane out of a deal. Poirot flipped through the file, his fingers pausing on a grainy photograph of Crane shaking hands with a gaunt man in a Paris café. Intéressant. And yet, Monsieur Crane was not in London when the shot was fired. Or so he says. Japp snorted. Alibis can be bought, Mr. Poirot. You taught me that. What's your take? You've been poking around that house like a bloodhound. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. The house, it speaks, Japp. The cleaned fireplace, the missing book, the creak on the back stairs. These are not accidents. The killer is someone who knows the house intimately, someone who moves unseen. But they are also someone who knows me, my past, my failure in Ostende. This is personal. Hastings frowned. Personal? But who in that house could know about Ostende? Lady Ashbourne, Grayson. Elsie's too young, and Crane's a businessman, not a historian. Exactement, Poirot said, his voice soft. That is why we must test our allies and our adversaries. Japp, I propose a little experiment. We shall invite the household to Scotland Yard under the pretence of new evidence. You, Hastings, will observe their reactions, and I shall play the fool, as always. The next day the Ashbourne household gathered in a Stark meeting room at Scotland Yard. Lady Ashbourne sat rigid, her black mourning dress stark against her pale skin. Grayson stood by the door, his face a mask of neutrality. Elsie fidgeted, her eyes darting to the windows. Crane lounged in a chair, his casual demeanour at odds with the tension in the room. Japp, playing his part, slammed a file on the table. We've got new evidence. A witness who saw a man leaving the Ashbourne house the night of the murder. Foreign accent, moustache, tall. Ring any bells? Poirot, seated quietly, widened his eyes in mock alarm. Mon Dieu, a moustache. Surely, not I. He chuckled, but his gaze swept the room, noting every reaction. Lady Ashbourne's clenched hands, Grayson's slight flinch, Elsie's gasp, Crane's sudden stillness. Lady Ashbourne spoke first, her voice sharp. "This is absurd. No one was in the house but the staff, and my husband." Crane leaned forward, his tone smooth. "Sounds like you're grasping at straws, Inspector. A foreign accent. Could be anyone." Poirot tilted his head, his voice mild. "Or someone. Tell me, Monsieur Crane, your business with Lord Ashbourne, it was always above board? No secrets, no deals in the shadows of Paris?" Crane's eyes narrowed, but he smiled. "I'm a businessman, Mr. Poirot. Secrets are part of the trade." Japp pressed on, detailing the Paris telegram, watching as Crane's composure wavered. Meanwhile, Poirot observed the others, his mind cataloguing their silences, their glances, their tells. Elsie's nervous fidgeting intensified, and Grayson's hand twitched toward his pocket, a gesture Poirot had seen before. As the meeting ended, Poirot lingered, pulling Hastings aside. "You saw, mon ami. The adversary reveals themselves in the smallest ways. Crane is hiding something, but he is not alone. Grayson, Elsie, they know more than they say. And Lady Ashbourne? Her grief, it is real, but is it only for her husband?" Back at Baker Street, Poirot stood by the fire, his expression grave. "Allies and adversaries, Hastings. They blur in this case. Japp is our ally, but even he doubts my methods. You are my rock, but you question my secrecy. And the household, they are both victims and suspects. The grey cells, they must separate the truth from the lies." Hastings nodded, his loyalty unwavering. "What's next, then?" Poirot's smile was steely. "Next, we tighten the net. The killer thinks they have outplayed us, but they have not reckoned with the trust between us, nor the cunning of Hercule Poirot." As the fire crackled, Poirot's mind sharpened, ready to turn allies into weapons and adversaries into prey. The game was far from over. Chapter 7. The Weight of Intuition. The drizzle outside Hercule Poirot's Baker Street flat painted the windows with streaks of silver, mirroring the tangled threads of the Ashbourne case in Poirot's mind. He sat at his desk, a single lamp casting a warm glow over his notebook, where the words mirror, watch, ostend, and fireplace formed a constellation of clues. For once, his usual air of serene confidence was tinged with something else, doubt. The little grey cells, so often his infallible guide, were wrestling with a feeling that defied logic, intuition. Captain Hastings, sprawled in an armchair, tossed aside a magazine. "Poirot, you're quieter than a monastery tonight. That meeting at Scotland Yard rattled everyone, but we're still nowhere near naming the killer. What's got you so pensive?" Poirot's fingers paused over the notebook, his eyes distant. "Mon ami, it is the weight of intuition. The grey cells, they are precise, methodical, but sometimes they whisper something else. A hunch, Hastings, and in this case it leads me to a path I do not fully trust." Hastings raised an eyebrow. "A hunch? You? I thought you swore by evidence and order, not gut feelings." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile breaking through. "Oui, order is my gospel, but even Hercule Poirot is human. The intuition, it is like a shadow. It follows, but it is not always clear. And yet, in the Ashbourne case, It speaks loudly. The murder of Lord Ashbourne remained a puzzle of locked doors, missing weapons, and cryptic taunts. The note about a mirror, the broken watch tied to Poirot's Ostende failure, the cleaned fireplace, the missing book, and the tensions revealed at Scotland Yard had deepened the mystery. Poirot's intuition now pointed to a single figure, Elsie, the nervous maid. But the evidence was thin, and he feared his instincts might betray him. Determined to test his hunch, Poirot arranged to revisit the Ashbourne residence, this time with a specific focus. He and Hastings arrived under a grey sky, greeted by Grayson, whose impeccable demeanour seemed strained. "Lady Ashbourne is indisposed, sir," he said, "but I can fetch Elsie if you wish to speak with her." "Oui, s'il vous plaît," Poirot replied, his tone mild, but his eyes sharp. "And, Monsieur Grayson, the back stairs, may we examine them? The creak Elsie mentioned intrigues me." Grayson hesitated, then nodded. "As you wish, sir." Back stairs, narrow and dimly lit, wound from the servants' quarters to the main floor, passing near the study. Poirot moved slowly, his gloved hand brushing the banister, his ears attuned to every sound. At a particular step he paused, pressing down. A faint creak echoed, sharp and distinct. "Voila," Poirot murmured. The creak Elsie heard. Not the storm, not the house settling, but a footstep. Someone used these stairs the night of the murder. Hastings frowned. But who? Elsie was in the kitchen. Grayson claims he was in his room. Lady Ashbourne was upstairs. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And yet, the intuition, it points to Elsie. Let us see if she confirms or denies. Elsie appeared in the servants' hall, her face pale, her hands twisting her apron into knots. "You wanted me, sir?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oui, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his tone gentle but probing. "The night of Lord Ashbourne's death, you heard a creak on the back stairs. Tell me, did you see anyone? A shadow, perhaps, or a glimpse of movement?" Elsie's eyes darted to the floor. "No, sir, I told you I was in the kitchen. I just heard the creak, that's all." Poirot tilted his head, his gaze unwavering. "And the visitor you mentioned, the man with the foreign accent, you said he had a moustache like me. But was there more? A detail you forgot, perhaps? A scarf, a ring, a way he walked." Her hands trembled and she bit her lip. I don't remember, sir. It was dark and I only saw him for a moment." Poirot nodded, but his mind was racing. Elsie's fear was palpable, but was it the fear of a witness or a culprit? His intuition screamed that she was hiding something, yet the evidence, a creak, a vague description, was flimsy. He thanked her and led Hastings back to the study, his expression troubled. Inside the study, Poirot stood by the desk, his fingers tracing the spot where the note had been found. "The truth lies in the mirror." "Hastings," he said softly, "the intuition, it is a dangerous guide. If I am wrong about Elsie, I risk accusing an innocent. If I am right, I must find the proof, or the killer will slip away." Hastings, sensing Poirot's unease, clapped a hand on his shoulder. "You've never been wrong before, old chap. Trust yourself. If your gut says Elsie's involved, there's something to it." Poirot's smile was faint. "Merci, mon ami. But the grey cells, they demand more than a feeling. We must find the link The mirror, the watch, the stairs. Elsie, she is a piece of the puzzle, but is she the key or a distraction? That evening, back at Baker Street, Poirot sat by the fire, his notebook open, but untouched. The weight of intuition pressed upon him, a reminder that even his formidable mind was not infallible. The Ashbourne case was testing not just his logic, but his faith in himself. As the rain pattered against the windows, the little grey cells battled the shadow of doubt, determined to uncover the truth. Chapter 8. A Game of Motives. The air in Hercule Poirot's Baker Street flat was thick with the scent of tisane and the quiet hum of concentration. Poirot stood before a small chalkboard he had set up in the corner, its surface covered with names: Lady Ashbourne, Grayson, Elsie Crane, connected by lines and question marks. The Ashbourne case had become a labyrinth of clues and contradictions, and Poirot's little grey cells were now focused on the most elusive element of all: motive. Captain Hastings, perched on the edge of an armchair, watched Poirot with a mix of admiration and exasperation. "I say, Poirot, you've got more suspects than a penny dreadful. The locked room, the watch, the creaky stairs, fine, but why would any of them kill Ashbourne? What's the motive?" Poirot turned, his eyes glinting like polished jade. "Exactement, mon ami. The motive, it is the heart of the crime. The grey cells, they construct a map of the mind. Each suspect, their desires, their fears. This murder, it is not random. It is a game of motives, and we must play to win." The case had grown denser with each revelation. The locked study, the missing weapon, the note about a non-existent mirror, the broken watch tied to Poirot's past in Ostende, the cleaned fireplace, the missing book, and the creak on the back stairs. Poirot's intuition had pointed to Elsie, but her fear could be that of a witness rather than a culprit. Now, with too many suspects and too few answers, Poirot turned to the psychology of the household, seeking the spark that ignited the crime. He had arranged a meeting at the Ashbourne residence, this time with Inspector Japp in tow, to probe deeper into the relationships and rivalries that swirled around Lord Ashbourne. The drawing-room, with its polished surfaces and stifling air, felt like a stage for Poirot's next act. Lady Ashbourne sat stiffly, her morning dress a stark contrast to her pale face. Grayson stood by the door, his posture impeccable but his eyes wary. Elsie hovered near a tea-tray, her hands trembling. Victor Crane, the business associate, leaned against the mantelpiece, his casual air belied by the tension in his jaw. Japp, playing the gruff policeman, opened the discussion. "We're here to clear up some inconsistencies. Lord Ashbourne was a powerful man. Wealth, influence, enemies. Someone in this house knows more than they're letting on." Poirot, seated with an air of benign curiosity, nodded. "Oui, Inspector. Let us consider the motives. Madame Ashbourne, your husband was a man of secrets, no? Did he share his business dealings, his fears with you?" Lady Ashbourne's lips tightened. "Reginald was private, as I've said. He kept his work separate from our life. If he had enemies, I was not privy to them." Poirot tilted his head, his voice soft but piercing. "And yet, madame, you are not surprised by his death." "Grief, yes, but surprise? No. Why is that?" Her eyes flickered, but she held his gaze. "I loved my husband, Mr. Poirot, but I am not naive. Men like Reginald attract danger. Poirot nodded, turning to Crane. Monsieur Crane, you and Lord Ashbourne built an empire of steel. A lucrative trade, but not without disputes. The telegram from Paris, it suggests you were negotiating with unsavoury partners. Did Lord Ashbourne approve? Crane's smile was thin. Reginald and I had our differences, but we were partners. If I was in Paris, it was to protect our interests. I had no reason to want him dead. Vraiment? Poirot's tone was mild, but his eyes were sharp. And yet, a man with no enemies does not die in a locked room. He shifted his attention to Grayson. Monsieur Grayson, you served Lord Ashbourne for years. Loyalty, it is a noble thing, but it can hide resentment. Did your master ever wrong you? A slight, perhaps, that festered. Grayson's face remained impassive. I was devoted to Lord Ashbourne, sir. My duty was my life. I had no cause to harm him. Finally Poirot turned to Elsie, who flinched under his gaze. Mademoiselle Elsie, you are young, nervous, but observant. The visitor with the foreign accent, did he speak to Lord Ashbourne about business, about secrets, or was he someone closer to the household? Elsie's voice was barely audible. I don't know, sir. I only saw him leave. He didn't say nothing to me. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. A game of motives, mes amis. Each of you has a reason to lie, to conceal. Lady Ashbourne, perhaps you feared your husband's secrets would ruin you. Monsieur Crane, a business deal gone sour could drive a man to desperation. Monsieur Grayson, loyalty can curdle into betrayal. And Elsie, fear can make one silent or complicit. The room was silent, the weight of his words hanging heavy. Japp, sensing the tension, stepped in. If anyone knows something, now's the time to speak. We're closing in. As they left the house, Hastings whispered, You pushed them hard, Poirot, but did you get anywhere? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. We, Hastings. The grey cells, they see the shadows in their words. Lady Ashbourne hides a fear, Crane a greed, Grayson a pride, Elsie a secret. The motive, it is there, but it is tangled in their minds. We must unravel it. Back at Baker Street, Poirot stood before his chalkboard, adding new lines between the names. The killer, he murmured. They did not act alone. The motive, it is shared. A conspiracy, perhaps, or a chain of desires. The grey cells, they will find the thread. As the evening deepened, Poirot's mind danced through the motives, each suspect a player in a game where the stakes were life and death. The truth, he knew, was close, but it would demand every ounce of his cunning to expose it. Chapter 9. The Cost of Truth. The London sky was a bruise of grey and violet, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Inside Hercule Poirot's Baker Street flat, the atmosphere was equally charged. Poirot stood by the window, his silhouette sharp, against the dim light, his hands clasped behind his back. The Ashbourne case had reached a critical juncture, and for the first time, Poirot's unwavering pursuit of truth was shadowed by a moral dilemma. The little grey cells, so adept at unravelling puzzles, now grappled with the consequences of their revelations. Captain Hastings, nursing a brandy by the fire, broke the silence. Poirot, you've been staring out that window for ages. You've got that look, like you're about to crack the case, or confess to a crime yourself. What's eating you?" Poirot turned, his eyes reflecting a rare vulnerability. "Mon ami, the truth, it is a double-edged sword. In this case, to expose the killer may destroy more than the guilty. The grey cells, they see the path, but the heart, it questions the cost. The Ashbourne murder had woven a web of clues. The locked study, the missing weapon, the note about a mirror, the broken watch tied to Ostend, the cleaned fireplace, the missing book, the creaky stairs, and the tangled motives of the household. Poirot's probing had narrowed the suspects: Lady Ashbourne, Grayson, Elsie, and Crane. But a new piece of evidence, uncovered by Inspector Japp, had shifted the stakes. Japp had arrived earlier that day, his face grim. "Found something in Ashbourne's private papers, Mr. Poirot. A letter, hidden in a locked drawer. It's from Elsie's mother, dated years ago. Seems Ashbourne had dealings with her. Elsie might be his daughter." Hastings had gasped, but Poirot had remained silent, his mind racing. If Elsie was Ashbourne's daughter, her fear, her silences, took on new meaning. Was she a victim, a witness, or a killer driven by betrayal? And if Poirot exposed her, what would become of her, a young woman already trembling on the edge of ruin? Determined to confront this dilemma, Poirot arranged a private meeting with Elsie at a small café near the Ashbourne residence, away from prying eyes. The café was quiet, its tables empty save for a few weary travellers. Elsie sat across from Poirot, her hands twisting a handkerchief, her eyes avoiding his. "Mademoiselle Elsie," Poirot began, his voice gentle but firm, "I must ask you a question of great importance. Your mother, did she know Lord Ashbourne? Did she speak of him perhaps as someone close?" Elsie's face crumpled, tears welling. "How did you know?" I found out only last year. My mum, she told me before she died. He was my father, but he never wanted me. He paid her to keep quiet, to keep me away." Poirot nodded, his heart heavy. "And this secret, it hurt you? Did it make you angry? Angry enough to act?" Her eyes widened, panic flashing. "No, I swear, I didn't. Kill him. I hated him, yes, but I couldn't. I wouldn't." Poirot studied her, his intuition warring with his logic. Her fear seemed genuine, but fear could mask guilt. "The night of the murder, Elsie, you heard the creak on the stairs. Was it you moving through the house, or did you see someone else?" She shook her head, sobbing. "I was in the kitchen, I swear. I heard the creak, but I didn't see nothing. Please, sir, don't tell anyone about my mum. They'll think I did it, and I didn't." Poirot leaned back, his mind a storm of calculations. If Elsie was innocent, exposing her parentage could ruin her reputation and livelihood for no reason. But if she was guilty, withholding the truth could let a killer walk free. The cost of truth, he realized, was not just his to bear. Back at Baker Street, Poirot confided in Hastings, a rare breach of his usual secrecy. "Mon ami, I am torn. Elsie's secret, it is a motive, but not proof. To reveal it may destroy her, yet to conceal it risks justice. What would you do?" Hastings, surprised by the question, rubbed his chin. "Blimey, Poirot, that's a tough one. I'd say, trust your instincts. You've always said the grey cells don't lie. If you think she's innocent, maybe there's another way to catch the killer without dragging her through the mud." Poirot's smile was faint. Merci, Hastings. Your heart, it is simple but true. The grey cells, they must find a path where justice does not crush the innocent. He turned to his chalkboard, adding Elsie's name with a question mark. The other suspects, Lady Ashbourne, Grayson, Crane, remained in play, their motives intertwined with Elsie's secret. Lady Ashbourne might have known of her husband's indiscretion. Grayson might have protected the family's honour, and Crane might have exploited the scandal for gain. The truth, Poirot knew, lay in the delicate balance of these motives. As the rain began to fall, Poirot stood by the window, his resolve hardening. The cost of truth was high, but he would not let it break the innocent or shield the guilty. The little grey cells, burdened but unyielding, pressed on toward the heart of the mystery. Chapter 10. Echoes from the Past. The gaslights of Baker Street flickered through the evening mist, casting a ghostly glow on Hercule Poirot's window. Inside his flat, the air was charged with the weight of memory. Poirot sat at his desk, the broken watch from the Ashbourne library before him, its frozen hands a haunting reminder of his failure in Ostend. The Ashbourne case had become more than a murder. It was a mirror reflecting his past, and now an old adversary had emerged to challenge him once more. Captain Hastings, warming his hands by the fire, glanced at Poirot with concern. "You've been staring at that watch again, Poirot. You said it tied to Ostend, but you've gone all brooding. What's this about an old adversary? Surely no one from your Belgian days is mixed up in this." Poirot's eyes, sharp and troubled, met Hastings. "Mon ami, the past, it is never truly gone. The grey cells, they hear echoes, echoes of a man I thought I had left behind. This watch, this crime, it is his signature." The Ashbourne murder had woven a complex tapestry. The locked study, the missing weapon, the cryptic note about a mirror, the cleaned fireplace, the missing book, the creaky stairs, Elsie's secret, parentage, and the tangled motives of Lady Ashbourne, Grayson, and Crane. The watch, with its link to Poirot's unsolved case in Ostend, suggested a personal vendetta. Now, a new clue had surfaced, pulling Poirot back to a name he had hoped to forget: Etienne Moreau. The revelation had come that morning, when Poirot received a letter from Monsieur Lefebvre, the Belgian historian. Enclosed was a photograph of the watch's crest, matched to a record of Etienne Moreau, a shadowy figure from Ostend's underworld. Moreau, a master manipulator, had been the prime suspect in the Dubois murder. The case Poirot failed to solve. The watch hidden in Dubois' home bore the same crest, a taunt Poirot had never forgotten. Lefebvre's note warned that Moreau was rumoured to have fled to London after the war, vanishing into the city's underbelly. Poirot shared the discovery with Hastings and Inspector Japp, who joined them at the flat. Japp, flipping through the letter, frowned. "This Moreau chap sounds like a ghost story. Even if he's in London, how's he tied to Ashbourne? And why target you?" Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. "Moreau, he is a man of games. In Ostend, he killed Dubois to settle a debt, but he staged the crime to mock me. A locked room, a hidden watch, an impossible puzzle. Now, with Ashbourne, the pattern repeats. The watch, the locked study, the note. It is his way of saying, 'Hercule Poirot, you failed then, and you will fail again.'" Hastings looked alarmed. But how would Moreau know Ashbourne, or Elsie, or any of them? Précisément, Poirot said, his voice low. That is the question. Moreau, he does not act alone. He manipulates. He uses others. Someone in the Ashbourne household is his pawn. Perhaps knowingly, perhaps not. Determined to trace Moreau's shadow, Poirot and Japp visited a seedy pub in Whitechapel, known as a haunt for continental exiles. The air was thick with tobacco smoke and the murmur of foreign tongues. Poirot, dressed in a plain coat to blend in, approached the barman, a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek. "Bonsoir," Poirot said, his accent deliberately softened. "I seek information about a man, a Belgian, Etienne Moreau. He is known to frequent such places." The barman's eyes narrowed, but a few coins loosened his tongue. "Moreau? Heard the name. Slippery sort, keeps to the shadows. Was in here a month back, talking to a toff, sharp suit, dark hair. Didn't catch his name, but they were thick as thieves." Poirot's heart quickened. This toff, he had a mustache, perhaps, or a foreign air. The barman shrugged. Didn't notice. "But Moreau, he's trouble. If you're after him, watch your back." Back at Baker Street, Poirot paced, his mind weaving the new information into the tapestry. The toff could be Crane, whose Paris dealings suggested a darker side, or even Grayson, whose loyalty might mask a double life. Elsie's visitor with the foreign accent could be Moreau himself, orchestrating the crime from the shadows. "Hastings," Poirot said, stopping abruptly. "The echoes from Ostende, they are loud now. Moreau is here in London, and he has struck at Ashbourne to strike at me. But why Ashbourne? The grey cells, they suggest a connection, a debt, a secret, a betrayal." Japp, still sceptical, crossed his arms. "If this Moreau's your man, we'll need more than a barman's word. What's your next move?" Poirot's smile was steely. "We return to the household, but with new eyes. We look for Moreau's touch, a word, a glance, a trace of his cunning. The adversary, he thinks he has outwitted Hercule Poirot. But the grey cells, they hear the echoes, and they will not be silenced." As the mist thickened outside, Poirot's resolve hardened. The past had returned to haunt him, but he would face it, unravelling the threads of Ostende and London to expose the killer, and the ghost who pulled the strings. Chapter 11. The Theatre of Justice. The grand drawing-room of the Ashbourne residence was ablaze with candlelight, the flickering flames casting dramatic shadows on the polished walls. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre of the room, his small frame commanding the space like a maestro before an orchestra. His moustache was impeccable, his eyes alight with purpose. Tonight he had orchestrated a denouement, a theatrical unveiling designed to trap a killer. But beneath his confident facade, Poirot wrestled with a question. Was his love for such theatrics a pursuit of justice, or a performance for his own ego? Captain Hastings, seated among the gathered household, whispered to Inspector Japp, "Poirot's in his element, isn't he? But I hope this show of his catches the murderer, and not just applause." Japp grunted, his eyes scanning the room. "He'd better deliver. We've got no hard evidence, just his hunches and that blasted watch." The Ashbourne case had reached its climax. the locked study, the missing weapon, the cryptic note about a mirror, the broken watch tied to a stand, the cleaned fireplace, the missing book, the creaky stairs, Elsie's secret, and the shadow of Etienne Moreau had woven a complex web. Poirot's investigation had pointed to Moreau as the puppet master, manipulating someone in the household, Lady Ashbourne, Grayson, Elsie or Crane, to execute the murder. Tonight he would force the truth into the open. The room was filled with tension. Lady Ashbourne sat rigid, her hands clasped tightly. Grayson stood by the door, his face a mask of stoic duty. Elsie hovered near the tea-tray, her eyes red from nervous tears. Victor Crane leaned against the mantelpiece, his casual demeanour strained. Poirot had invited them under the pretence of revealing decisive evidence, a ruse to unsettle the guilty. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, we are gathered to unmask a murderer. Lord Ashbourne was killed in a locked room, a crime designed to baffle. But the grey cells of Hercule Poirot, they see through the illusion. He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. The clues, they tell a story. A note, the truth lies in the mirror. No mirror in the study, yet it speaks of reflection. Secrets hidden in plain sight. A watch, broken, hidden in the library, its crest a link to my past in Ostend, to a man named Etienne Moreau, a fireplace cleaned to conceal, a book missing to hide, stairs that creak with a killer's step. And motives, oh, the motives! Betrayal, greed, revenge, shame. Lady Ashbourne's voice cut through. Mr. Poirot, enough theatrics. Who killed? My husband? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Patience, madame. The theatre of justice, it requires a build-up. Let us consider the players. He turned to Crane. Monsieur Crane, your Paris dealings suggest a man who plays with fire. Did Ashbourne threaten to expose you? Crane's jaw tightened. I've told you, I was in Paris. I had no quarrel with Reginald. Poirot nodded, pivoting to Grayson. Monsieur Grayson, your loyalty is admirable. But what if Ashbourne betrayed that loyalty? A secret, perhaps, about his past. Grayson's eyes narrowed, but he remained silent. Poirot continued, his gaze softening as it fell on Elsie. Mademoiselle Elsie, you carry a heavy burden. Lord Ashbourne's daughter, hidden, rejected. Did your pain drive you to act? Elsie gasped, tears spilling. No, I swear I didn't. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. And yet the killer is not alone. Etienne Moreau, a ghost from my past, pulls the strings. He staged this crime to mock me, as he did in Ostend. But who is his pawn? He stopped, his voice dropping to a whisper. The fireplace. It was cleaned not to hide ash, but to conceal. A tool, a hidden compartment discovered this morning by Inspector Japp. Japp nodded, producing a small blackened key. This key, it unlocks a safe in Ashbourne's study, containing documents, proof of a scandal, a child, a betrayal. Lady Ashbourne's face paled. What scandal? Poirot's eyes locked onto hers. Madame, you knew of Elsie's parentage. You knew Ashbourne's shame. Did you kill to protect your honour, with Moreau's help? She stood, trembling. How dare you? I loved Reginald, despite his flaws. Poirot's voice softened, but his gaze was unrelenting. Or perhaps, Monsieur Grayson, you acted to shield your mistress, guided by Moreau's cunning." Grayson flinched, his hand twitching. Poirot spun to Crane. "Or you, Monsieur Crane, did Moreau offer you a deal? Ashbourne's death for a fortune?" The room erupted, Crane shouting denials, Elsie sobbing, Lady Ashbourne collapsing into her chair. Amid the chaos, Grayson slipped toward the door, but Japp was faster, blocking his path. "Not so fast," Japp growled. Poirot raised his hands, restoring order. "The theatre it reveals. Grayson, your loyalty was to Lady Ashbourne, not her husband. Moreau, he found you, used you, gave you the key to the safe to plant the documents, to make it seem Elsie was the motive. But the creak on the stairs, it was you, carrying the weapon, staging the locked room." Grayson's face crumpled, his voice hoarse. "Moreau, he promised she'd be safe. Ashbourne was ruining her, ruining us all." Poirot's expression was sombre. "The cost of justice, it is high. But the truth, it must be faced." As Japp handcuffed Grayson, Poirot stepped back, the weight of the performance settling on him. The theatre of justice had caught the killer, but at what cost to his own soul? The grey cells, triumphant, whispered of Moreau, still at large, waiting for the next act. Chapter 12. The Limits of Genius. The fog clung to Baker Street like a shroud, muffling the clatter of hooves and the distant cries of newsboys. Inside Hercule Poirot's flat, the air was heavy with the aftermath of triumph and the shadow of doubt. Poirot sat at his desk, the chalkboard of suspects now erased, save for a single name, Etienne Moreau. Grayson's confession had unravelled the Ashbourne murder, but Moreau, the puppet master, remained elusive. For the first time, Poirot felt the sting of his own limitations, his little grey cells straining against a foe who seemed to anticipate his every move. Captain Hastings, slumped in an armchair, broke the silence. "I say, Poirot, you did it. Caught. Grayson exposed the plot. Why the long face? You're the hero of the hour." Poirot's eyes, usually so sharp, were clouded with introspection. "Mon ami, the hero? Perhaps, but the grey cells, they are not infallible. Grayson was the hand, but Moreau is the mind. And Moreau, he has outplayed me before. What if he does so again?" The Ashbourne case had been a labyrinth. The locked study, the missing weapon, the note about a mirror, the broken watch tied to Ostend, the cleaned fireplace, the missing book, the creaky stairs, Elsie's secret, and the motives of Lady Ashbourne, Crane, and Grayson. Grayson's arrest, facilitated by Poirot's theatrical denouement, had revealed his role as Moreau's pawn, manipulated to kill Ashbourne to protect Lady Ashbourne's honour. But Moreau, the architect of the crime, had slipped through their grasp, leaving Poirot to confront the possibility that his genius had met its match. Inspector Japp arrived, his coat damp from the fog. "We've got Grayson locked up, Mr. Poirot, and he's singing like a canary. Says Moreau contacted him months ago, fed him lies about Ashbourne's plans to disinherit Lady Ashbourne. But Moreau himself, not a trace. We've got men combing. Whitechapel, but he's a ghost." Poirot nodded, his fingers tracing the edge of the broken watch, now returned to his desk. "Moreau, he is no ghost, Japp. He is a shadow, always one step ahead. In Ostend, he mocked me with a watch, a locked room, a murder I could not solve. Now he repeats the game, but with greater stakes. The grey cells, they see his pattern, but they cannot find his face. Hastings frowned. But you've got the evidence, the key, the documents, Grayson's confession. Surely that's enough to track Moreau down. Poirot's smile was bitter. Evidence? Oui, but against a man who leaves no footprints. Moreau does not act directly. He manipulates, he vanishes. The limits of genius, Hastings, are in the human heart. Moreau knows mine, knows my need for order, for justice. He uses it against me. Determined to push past his doubts, Poirot proposed a final gambit. He and Japp returned to the Ashbourne residence, searching for any trace Moreau might have left. The house, now shrouded in mourning, felt emptier, its grandeur hollow. Lady Ashbourne, pale but composed, met them in the drawing-room. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady, "you have brought justice for my husband, but at what cost? My household is broken, my name tarnished. Was it worth it?" Poirot's gaze was sombre. "Madame, the truth, it is a heavy burden. But Diosnes, let a killer walk free, that is heavier still. Tell me, did you ever hear the name Etienne Moreau? A man, perhaps, who visited under another guise?" Her eyes flickered, a spark of recognition. "Moreau? No, but there was a man, months ago. He called himself Leclerc, a consultant. He met with Reginald, spoke of business in Europe. I thought nothing of it." Poirot's heart quickened. "This Leclerc, describe him. Tall, thin, with a sharp face and a faint accent," she said. "He wore a scarf, even in the warmth. I saw him only once." Poirot exchanged a glance with Japp. It matched the barman's description from Whitechapel. Moreau had been in the house, planting the seeds of murder. But where was he now? Back at Baker Street, Poirot stood before his chalkboard, now blank. "The limits of genius," he murmured, "are in the chase. Moreau, he is close, but he knows I am closer. He will strike again to prove he can outwit me. The grey cells, they must be sharper, faster." Hastings, ever loyal, clapped a hand on Poirot's shoulder. "You'll get him, Poirot. You always do. You're Hercule Poirot, after all." Poirot's smile was faint but resolute. "Merci, mon ami. The grey cells, they are bruised but not broken. Moreau thinks he has seen my limits, but he has not seen my resolve." As the fog thickened outside, Poirot's mind sharpened, ready to face the shadow of Moreau. The game was not over, and the little grey cells, though tested, were far from defeated. Chapter 13. The Final Revelation. The London night was a canvas of stars, the fog having lifted to reveal a crisp, clear sky. Inside Hercule Poirot's Baker Street flat, the fire burned low, casting a warm glow over the room where Poirot stood, his small frame radiating a quiet intensity. The Ashbourne case had reached its crescendo, and the little grey cells, tested by doubt and shadowed by the past, were poised to unveil the final truth. The broken watch, the locked room, the cryptic note, and the spectre of Etienne Moreau had led to this moment, a revelation that would redefine Poirot's legacy. Captain Hastings, seated by the fire, leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Poirot. "You've been awfully secretive, Poirot. Grayson's behind bars, but you've got that look like there's one last twist. What's it to be?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Mon ami, the grey cells, they have danced a long and perilous waltz. The Ashbourne murder, it was not merely a crime, but a mirror held up to Hercule Poirot. His methods, his failures, his very soul. Tonight we see the reflection clearly." The case had been a labyrinth of clues. The locked study, the missing weapon, the note about a mirror, the broken watch tied to Ostend, the cleaned fireplace, the missing book, the creaky stairs, Elsie's secret parentage, and the motives of Lady Ashbourne, Grayson, and Crane. Grayson's confession had exposed him as Moreau's pawn, but Moreau himself remained a shadow, taunting Poirot with echoes of his unsolved case in Ostend. Yet, in the quiet hours since Grayson's arrest, Poirot had uncovered a final piece of the puzzle, a truth that tied every thread together. Inspector Japp arrived, his face weary but expectant. "You sent for me, Mr. Poirot. Said you had something. Big. I hope it's Moreau. We've turned Whitechapel upside down and found nothing." Poirot nodded, gesturing to a chair. "Asseyez-vous, Japp. The grey cells, they have found what the eyes could not. The final revelation. It is not only about Moreau, but about Ashbourne himself, and the secret that bound them all." He began to pace, his voice steady, but charged, with purpose. The murder of Lord Ashbourne was a masterpiece of misdirection, designed to challenge me. The locked room, the watch, the note, they were Moreau's signature, yes, but they hid a deeper truth. Ashbourne was not a random victim. He was a man with a past that intersected with Moreau's in Ostend. Hastings frowned. Ashbourne? In Ostend? But how? Poirot's eyes gleamed. The grey cells, they returned to the watch. Its crest, identified by Monsieur Lefebvre, was not only Moreau's mark, but a symbol of a secret society, a group of wealthy men who profited from the chaos of pre-war Europe. Ashbourne, under another name, was one of them. In Ostend, he was involved in the Dubois affair, the case I failed to solve. Dubois, the merchant, was killed to silence him, and Ashbourne, then a young man, was complicit. Japp's jaw dropped. Ashbourne, a criminal, but he was a lord, a pillar of society. "Oui," Poirot said, and that was his greatest disguise. He came to London, built a new life, but Moreau never forgot. Moreau, you see, was not the mastermind in Ostend. He was the enforcer, betrayed by Ashbourne and the others. He vowed revenge, and years later he found Ashbourne here. Poirot paused, his voice softening. The note. The truth lies in the mirror. It was not about a physical mirror, but about reflection. Ashbourne's life was a mirror of lies, and Moreau staged the murder to expose it. The watch, hidden in the library, was a message to me, linking Ashbourne to Ostend. The fireplace, cleaned to hide a burned letter, a confession Ashbourne wrote but never sent. The missing book, it contained coded names of the society, removed to protect others still living. Hastings leaned forward. So, Moreau used Grayson to kill Ashbourne. But where's Moreau now? Poirot's expression grew sombre. That is the final revelation. This morning, I received a message, delivered anonymously to Scotland Yard. He produced a small, crumpled note, its handwriting, sharp and precise. It reads, "Poirot, you have won. But I am gone. The game ends, but not the war. "EM!" Japp cursed under his breath. "He's slipped us again." "Non," Poirot said, his voice firm. "He has retreated, but the grey cells, they have seen his face. Moreau is no longer a ghost. Know his methods, his motives. He will not strike again without knowing Hercule Poirot is waiting." He turned to the window, the stars reflecting in his eyes. "The Ashbourne case, it has shown me the truth of my own methods. The little grey cells, they are not infallible, but they are relentless. I failed in Ostend, but here I have reclaimed justice, not only for Ashbourne, but for Dubois, for Elsie, for all who suffered under lies." Hastings smiled, his loyalty unwavering. "You're a marvel, Poirot, but what about Elsie and Lady Ashbourne?" Poirot's smile was gentle. "Elsie, she will be protected. Her secret, it remains with us. Lady Ashbourne, she will mourn, but she will survive, knowing the truth of her husband's past. The legacy of the grey cells, it is not only in solving crimes, but in mending lives." As Japp and Hastings left, Poirot stood alone, the watch in his hand. The case had exposed his vulnerabilities, his past, his very essence. But it had also reaffirmed his purpose. The little grey cells, tempered by doubt and triumph, were ready for the next challenge, wherever it might lie.